Good. Here we have a speech given by the Lubavitcher Rebbe in the year, excuse me, it's given in the year 1967. 1967. And the reason why we're not learning the Bar Malchut is because it's relevant, of course, relevant to all times, but it's especially relevant to the year that the Rebbe spoke in it. Rosh Hashanah was on Monday. This year, Rosh Hashanah is going to be on Tuesday. And also, the year the Rebbe spoke was also a year that had 13 months in it. Shana Muberet, and this is not. Anyway, this is very interesting. And here it goes. It's in Yiddish, but maybe I'll learn a little bit Yiddish also. Here we go. Okay, let's go. There's a sentence in the Torah. Here, let's have a look at the sentence. Here, let's go. Let's have a look. It says, "V'shav Hashem Elokecha et shavutcha," that God will return your exiles. You return the returners. It could also be shavutcha, means the people that were in Shevi, that were in the exiles. V'richam mecha, and He'll have mercy on you. V'shav v'kabetzcha, and He will return and gather you from all the people that you were scattered over there. Okay, so here's a promise to the Jewish people written in the Bible, not one of the prophets, written in the Bible by Moses 3,300 and 30 years ago, and that God promises He will return all the Jewish people. So it means that there has to be such a thing as a Jewish people, even at the end of exile. And that's talking about right now. We're talking about now. This is a prophecy for now, that God will gather all the Jewish people that you are scattered over there. Let's have a look at the next sentence. The next sentence says, and even if you're scattered to the ends of the heavens, from there God will gather you together, and there He will take you. So in other words, no matter where the Jews are spiritually, physically, God will wake them all up and take them. Okay, let's have a look at what Rashi says, because Rashi is very interesting. Rashi is Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki. He lived about, 900 years ago. So it says, God will return your prisoners. It says God should have written, it says Heshiv, that God will return. That's what it means. Shav means that He will return. He will return, not He will make return. Heshiv means He will make them return. But Shav means that He will return, so to speak, He'll return Himself. Rabboteinu Lomdu, the rabbis taught us from here, that the Shekhinah, the God's presence, is with the Jewish people in Sorah, in the pain of exile. So as much pain as the Jewish people have from the Holocaust and from things that were much worse, the destruction of the temple and etc., as much as the pain as the people have, Jewish people had, as God also has pain. And when God redeems them, that God also writes down, He declares freedom for Himself. That He will return with them. God is in exile with the Jewish people, and God will return with them. Now, this is not me saying. This is Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, who was the Holy of Holies, and what he was saying is serious. It's not just his opinion. And also, we can say, it'll be great will be the day when God gathers up all of the exiles, and it will be difficult. It's difficult for God to gather up all the Jews, as though that God has to, Him personally, hold on to the hand of each and every Jew, hand on each and every Jew wherever they are. It says, you will be gathered one at a time, the Jewish people. That's a sentence in Isaiah. And also the exiles of the other nations also. We also found that God returned back the exiles of Ammon. What does that mean? So we'll see in a second. Okay, so what do we learn? God said He will return. No, don't say He'll return. He will return with the Jewish people. God is also in exile, and it's very difficult. He's going to gather all the Jewish people all together. It's a great day, and it's very difficult for God to do. Huh? That's what Rashi says. Let's see what this means. Okay, now we're just going to repeat what we learned. When it says that God will return, it says, Rashi has the question, it should have written in the Torah, that God will make the Jewish people return, not that he will return. What does it mean? What's the kavanah? And this is which the intention that Rashi wants to get across with his question is, as anstatt, instead of v'shav, instead of he will return, hat gesagt stehen, it should have said v'heshiv, that God will make the Jewish people return, but it doesn't say that. It says that he will return. This implies that God will return with them. As to leave let's now we're in the questions. So the Rashi asked the question. It should have said hey shiv, but why did God write shav? Question number one. Why also does it say that God, your God, will return? It should have said as the Hagdama Vesiba from them Veshav Muzain, it should be Veshav Ta Ad Hashem Elokecha. If so, it should be you will return to God. Huh? You will return to God. Mida Keneged Mida. Durach Shavta, by means of that Jewish people, we return to God. Then the next sentence will be Vishav, then God will return us. Is dach moving, so it's understood as the shav, that it says that God will return, or v'heshiv, or he will make return. This is referring to Hashem Elokecha, God, your God. Let's just look back at the sentence 1 second. Look, let's go back. Previous sentence. Here we go. Here, the sentence right before that, it says, and you will return to God and listen to his voice in everything that I command you today, you and your children with all of your hearts and all of your souls. Then comes the sentence we're talking about over here. Here we already know it's talking about God. And then after that it says, V'shav Hashem Elokecha, that God will reply. He will return, right? He will make return all of your exiles. You return to God, God will return to you. Return to you. He says, but that doesn't say Heshiv. It says Shav, that God will return. So that makes it a little bit sort of difficult. And that's what Rashi is coming to ask. So it's understood. The Shav or Heshiv, this obviously refers to God. Okay, so now we have another question. Good. God said Shav, it means that God returns with them. But why does it have to say another time God's name? Why does it have to say 2 times God's name? Here it says, and God will return. It said in the previous sentence that it's to God. It says the previous sentence over here, V'shavta ad Hashem Elokecha. And then after that it says, next sentence is the next sentence, V'shav Hashem Elokecha. Again, you don't have to repeat it again. It's obvious. Why does it repeat it again? So that's the questions Rashi is asking. And of course, Rashi gives the answer. We'll see. So Rashi says, our rabbis learned from here that, so to speak, because of these questions, why does it say Shav and doesn't say Heshiv, that God will make return? Why does God repeat his name? From this we learn that God's presence is with the Jewish people and suffering their pain in exile. And when the Jewish people are redeemed, so God also declares redemption for himself, that God will return with them. You know, we have to understand this because this is Judaism over here. Judaism is talking about that there's one God, and that God is creating everything in the world, everything. There's nothing except for him. He's creating everything. And so how can it be that God gets pain from exile? I mean, God can do whatever he wants to. There's nothing outside of God. How can God be put into exile? What does it mean? We'll see. We have to understand. In Parsha Shmot, there's the whole story in the book of Exodus where Moses is by the burning bush. As Rashi already said, it says that what is the burning bush? As thus was der Eberste, that which God appeared to himself, bitoch bevezen Moshe, that he appeared to Moses, mitoch asneh, from a burning bush, is this because mishum imo anochi b'tzorah, I am with you in your pain. It's a sentence in Psalms. Wie sagt Rashi, how can Rashi say, as men learned erst, the first time we learned that God is suffering is from here. This is in the book of Deuteronomy. This is the book of Devarim. Huh? God spoke to Moses by the burning bush. This was before the Jewish people went into this is before I'm sorry, this is before the Jewish people got out of Egypt. This is before they got out of Egypt. Let's say a year or whatever before they got out of Egypt. And there, God already says that I am suffering with the Jews. That's why I am in a burning bush, because I'm suffering with the Jews also. And Rashi says, no, we don't learn it from over there. We learn it over here that God is suffering with the Jews. But this is 40 years later. This is right before they're going into the land of Israel. How is it that Rashi says that from here we learn that God suffers? As the Shekhinah is with the Jewish people in pain in their exile. The Ace Men Vase, we already knew that from the book of Exodus, the story with the burning bush. We knew that before. Well, why does Rashi say from here we learn that God is in pain? Right? Here we learn, here in Deuteronomy we learn it's not so. We learned it over there. It says clearly. Also, the sentence Imo Anochi B'Tzorah is Dacha Amafursha Pasuk. This is a sentence in Psalms. Darfman Dach does nit uplearnen Mikan. You don't have to learn anything from here or from here that God suffers with the Jewish people. It says it clearly in Psalms. From a drik, you don't have to learn it from some sort of a learning, and you have to imply an implication. Here is it says it clearly. There's a sentence clearly that says in Psalms that that the God is with the Jewish people in their pain. Next question. In Pasuk, in the sentence where it says Shav Hashem Elokecha, that God will return with your exiles, Shteit Blois, it says only that God will kert zich from Galus, that God turns himself out of exile. Vu defint Rashi, where does Rashi learn from this sentence, the Hadgasha, to imply the implication that, what's the next sentence? Where does this go? There it goes. That the Shekhinah is in pain. It just says that God will escort them. So he'll escort them. It doesn't mean that the Shekhinah is in pain. God is just escorting them out. Like the warden of a prison, right, escorts one of the prisoners out. It's not this, the warden was in pain. In the sentence that it says that we're learning here, it says that God will return with the Jews. Rashi says that this shows us that God is suffering. Well, how does Rashi learn that? Well, the Rebbe is going to give good answers to these questions. We'll see. From this sentence, we know only that the Shekhinah is with them. But we don't know that the Shekhinah is suffering, that God's presence is suffering. What does that even mean? Was das wird gesagt, what this is said in the sentence, Imanochi B'Tzorah, that's what it says in Psalms. Or in the sentence, B'Kol Tzorah Tam Lotzar, or another sentence, and also another sentence in Psalms 20. Where's this from? Here we go, 1 second. Oh, here, no, it's down here, I see. All right. But so, okay. Anyway, it's a sentence in Psalm. 1 minute, give me a second. Okay. Well, there's other places to learn that God is suffering with the Jews. Not from here. Not from here. Here it doesn't even say that God is suffering. It just says that God will escort the Jews out of exile. Also, another thing is when Rashi will, as showing Zok Beferish, of what Rashi already says clearly. Is that right? Oh, here, no, I'm sorry, here. After Rashi says that the Shekhinah is with the Jewish people in the pain of exile, then it's already automatically understood as when the Jews go out of exile, as God goes out with the exile with them. So leave Vostaf Rashi, why does she have to say, when the Jews are redeemed, then God will come with them? It could have just said that the Jews will go out of exile and God will go out with them. What does that? What does Rashi have to repeat again? That when the Jewish people are redeemed, then God goes out with them. But now the Rebbe is going to give really knockout answers to all these, which is going to show us something very, very essential about the necessity, first of all, of the redemption to come, future redemption, and also that God is suffering in the redemption. What exactly is the dynamics going on of it? When Rashi will as shoin zogen beferish, when Rashi wants to say clearly, Hagamsi is l'chora movement, even though it's self-understood, b'chedei zu verstehen, in order to understand the language shav Hashem instead of heshit, that God will return with the Jewish people. What their gadar blois, he could just could have said clearly, kishin nigalim, when the Jewish people are redeemed, God will return with them. Why does Rashi have to say all of a sudden that God put himself into exile? It just says that God will return with the Jewish people. Why does it have to say that God, he declared for himself that he too would be in exile with the Jewish people? How does he learn that from the sentence? From the sentence in our Chumash. What does our sentence say? Let's go back to it again. Here it says, God will return your exiles. So, okay, God will return with your exiles, and he'll have mercy, and he'll gather you from all the people wherever you are scattered over there. Right? God will scatter. So what does Rashi say? That God is in pain, and that God put himself into exile. How did Rashi learn all those things? How did Rashi learn all these things? Just say that the Jewish people are the son of God, and God is waiting, so to speak, outside. He's doing everything he can to get the Jewish people out. And when they go, then God will be happy. He'll escort them out. Says Rashi, no. From here we learn that God is suffering, and that God is in exile with us, and that God, he sentenced himself to exile. And then when the Jews go out of exile, God will stop his pain and he'll go out with them. How does Rashi learn this? Finally, Darnach afterwards, Rashi and continues, and we can also say that great is the day of the gathering of the exile. And it'll be very, very difficult, as though God himself has to gather all the Jews together. Remember, we just learned that God himself has to gather all the Jews together and grab onto the hand of each one individually, ata taluktu, like it says, you will be gathered around, one at a time, Jewish people. There's a sentence in Isaiah. You will be gathered one at a time, Jewish people. God takes the Jewish people. Each and every one has his own personality. Each one his own thing that will convince him to return to Torah and commandments. Even in the other, and then Rashi even says, and also in the other exiles, God also gathered them together, like God returned the exile of Ammon, which we'll talk about that. What is it? Says the Rebbe, we have to understand, why did Rashi have to come to two explanations? First explanation, Rashi says, this comes to tell you that God is in exile with the Jewish people and that he will go out with them. Number one. And afterwards it says, and also we can learn another thing, that the day of redemption is a very great, massive day, that God is going to take every Jew by his hand and take the Jews out. And that's what he did with also Ammon. Why does Rashi have to have this the second one for? What does he have to think? The second explanation, that God, the great day of exile and the great day of redemption, and the, okay, it's going to be a great day, but how does he learn it from here? And why is it necessary to say? The sentence just says that God will return with the Jews. That's it. Say God will return with the Jews. Why does he have to say? And I have another explanation. In addition to that, the day of redemption will be great, and God will gather all of the Jews one at a time and bring them all together. How does Rashi learn this, and why is it necessary for him to say that? We have to understand, why does Rashi have two explanations? Das was Rashi, that which Rashi, benugan sich nit, that he's not sufficient, does not suffice with the od yesh lomar, and he says, ken men lichiora masber zayin, and yet we can explain from them lashon and shav Hashem Elokecha. Maybe we can say that the reason Rashi has to bring a second explanation is because that what it says, that God returned the Eibishter Vetzich, that God himself will get out of the exile, so to speak, is mashma. This implies as gefindt sich kivyochel in galus euch far them that God is in the exile before the Jewish people get out. In other words, God is also stuck in the exile with us. And because he's stuck in, so how can he get out? Like he's just as stuck here as we are. Nitblo is not only was that which God also will. Kumanahin in them Yom Kibbutz Galios. Not only will God come out in the day of the redemption, in order to Arois Neman to take the Jews out on their Rebbe, and therefore ankommen zum Pirish. He has to say, no, the Shekhinah is with the Jewish people in their exile. So don't think that the God will get out and then he'll take the Jews out. No, God is stuck in exile with us. And God from exile, he'll somehow or other take us out of exile with himself. Says the Rebbe, if so, see is but it's not understood. Why does Rashi have to come to the second explanation? Why doesn't he just use the first explanation that he said before? That the Jewish people are in exile and God will go out with them. Why does he have to come out to this strange idea that God is to gather them up one at a time and etc. And it's a very, very difficult day. Okay, in the pasuk, and also another question. In this sentence, it talks about the redemption of the Jewish people. That's what Rashi says. It says the Jewish people, that the Jewish people return to God, and God will gather up the Jewish people and together. Why does Rashi have to stick in this thing about the Av Galilius Shar almost, and also in the other exiles? Also, that's what we found by Ammon. And also that God will take all the Jews out, just like he did with Ammon. Says the Rebbe, the question is even stronger. To bring in order to bring a proof that God will go out from exile. A Rois Neman will take out from exile every single individual Jew. It would have been enough if Rashi just would have said, Zol bring, and he could have brought the Verter va'atem teluktu echad echad, that you will be gathered up one at a time. As them sium from the Verter Bnei Yisrael, the Jewish people. I'm sorry. On without the end of the end of the sentence in Isaiah is that God will gather you all up together, talaktu echad, one at a time. Jews, Bnei Yisrael. Therefore, Kentik. So therefore, it's very recognizable. We can see as Vil Demer Magi. She wants to stress. Is that which God takes the Jews out of exile. He takes each person by the hand. This is hat ashaychas oich also. I'm sorry. Oches biyado mamish ish mekomo hat ashaychas oich zu bnei Yisrael. It has a connection also to the Jewish people, not just to the other nations. He wants to see the Jewish people and others also. Was a Zoe Mashma. This also implies when it says Shav Hashem Elokecha, like this is the Tzveita Parish, thus was Ochas, that what he'll take the hand of each and every person is as Darfan Vile Hashem Elokecha, because God is your God, So if so, why does Rashi immediately have to say that also with the other nations also God gathered together? Two more questions. And then tomorrow we'll start with the answers. We'll repeat the questions again tomorrow, and then we'll. Vos is done Nogea. Why do we care about this whole? Why did Rashi have to bring this whole tremendous? The Rebbe, by the way, made it his life's work to explain Rashi. What is this whole long length? And therefore, we have to bring also all sorts of proofs from the prophets that God is also going to take the non-Jews, like he did with Ammon. He took them. Why such a big length? Why can't Rashi just say clearly, Shav Hashem Elokecha, at Shavutcha, that God will come out of exile with the Jews? That's it. Why does he have to bring that God will suffer and that God set suffering for himself and that God will gather all the Jews one at a time? And he did it with the other nations that also. Why this tremendous length? Final question. Vos meant Rashi. Why does Rashi have to say he'll gather with each Jew mamish? Really, nit biyadav stam biyadav mamish. So let's have a look at Rashi over here, and then we'll continue here. Rashi. Here it says. Here it says Yesh Lomar. We can also say that great is the day of the gathering of the exiles. That God will gather each person's hand, mamish, really, each individual from his place. Why does he have to say mamish, really? What does that mean, really? He'll really, of course, he'll gather the Jewish people, but you'll see God's hand come out from a cloud or something, and grab. What does it mean, really? What does it mean? Okay, now from all of these questions, we're going to come to an amazing conclusion, several amazing conclusions, that Rashi is telling us something about the future redemption and God's involvement in it, which is more than even supernatural. As we're going to talk about more, God willing, tomorrow.